Hi, so I saw a video of a guy who actually was talking about how a lot of African parents just care about what people think about them. Like they really focus and put in their mind and their thoughts on what other people actually think about them. And that helps with dictating what their actions would be like, what they're going to do, their decisions, and everything possible.
As an African kid raised by African parents, you start to realize as you get older that your parents have always worried about how other people feel about them. Like in middle school or high school, right? You bring your progress report or your report card and your grades are bad. You're struggling. Instead of your parents saying like, you're going through a situation right now, you're having bad grades, you need help, what can I do to help you, right? They would look at your report card and be like, oh my God, you're making me look bad amongst my friends. They're gonna think that my kid is not smart. And it's like, that's irrelevant right now. I need help. You realize that image is a big thing to the African community. That's why a lot of our African moms and dads drive Benzes. They probably can't afford it, but they just buy it because they're trying to fit in.
Let's talk about respect and African parents. Honestly, the word respect in a parental context is such a trigger for me. It pisses me off. Like, I'm literally getting pissed off just thinking about it now because a lot of African parents confuse respect for obedience. Respect and deference to them are the same thing. So, for example, it is considered disrespectful in a lot of African households to respond with your opinion. Like if your parent says, this is what's best, and you say, oh, actually, I think that this would be better. Disrespectful. Why are you arguing? This isn't the case in all African households. Don't bean soup in my comments. But this is definitely the way that I was raised, and I know a lot of my fellow Africans can relate that it's like if you do not do exactly what they want you to do, they will consider that to be a slight against them. And God forbid you try to actually set boundaries. Boundaries, that's why it's funny, like when first gen or second gen Africans are in therapy and the therapist is saying stuff like, oh, you can't let your parent cross that boundary. You have to tell them, oh, I'm not comfortable talking about this. Or, if you yell at me, I won't have that conversation. Try that with African parents. Yeah, try it. See what's going to happen. It's like you want respect, but you don't want to give it back. And that's why it's not respect, it's just obedience. And the other thing about African culture is that I can only speak to West Africans, but a lot of them are so obsessed with how people in the community view them. So for someone to see your child acting up or talking back or whatever is like as if it's a shame on you. So they will react out of fear that other people will be like, oh, look at that person's child. They just act any kind of way. And God forbid, especially if you're a girl, you're just an outspoken person that has your own values, you're done for. You're finished. Like, someone who has to literally, beat into somebody that they need to be respected is clearly not someone who inspires respect.
I relate to that so much because that's something that I've always been wanting to talk about because that is so annoying and it has been something that I have seen in my own home and I've seen in other people's family. It's just what happens in African households, and I don't think we talk about this enough. So I started getting so annoyed with it because since from being a child, all you just keep hearing is, what are people gonna think about me? Like, what are people gonna think about me? Like, you literally will hear a parent telling you that, what are people gonna think? What are others gonna think about them? What are others gonna think about them? And it's like if you grow up in such type of place and environment, they care so much about what other people think about them, what people's thoughts are. People are gonna gossip about me, this and that and that. And it's like when you even do something annoying or wrong in the house, instead of your parents actually be annoyed with you that you did that thing wrong, or that means they literally sit down and their focus is on telling you and yelling to you why, like, oh my God, like, what is this person gonna think about me, that you went out to do this, you did that, you did that, what are people gonna think about me? And it's like that's just the thoughts, like, what are people gonna think about you? Like, why do you care so deeply about what other people are gonna think about you? And it's like it just happens so much that it gets to a point that it's actually depressing because it's like, do you have your own thoughts of your own? Have you developed like a whole like self-concept? Do you have an identity of your own where you feel and think a certain way that it's only dependent on your own self? Like you're like, I don't think I want my child doing this, or I don't really feel like going out a certain way, wearing a certain clothes, affects people so much to the extent where you see people who be like they have a certain phone. I remember while I was still back in Nigeria, I think there was this obsession with buying iPhones. Like, oh, you gotta have an iPhone, you gotta have an iPhone. I had a Samsung phone that cost way more than the iPhone that some of my friends that were around me had. And it's like mostly they will now look at me and be like, D, you're supposed to have like a whole like iPhone. Like, why are you still using this phone? See people putting pressure on themselves to do some things. If they didn't have a focus on other people or what they are thinking about them, they won't have those stuff. So it's like it's just too bad, and I feel like it's toxic. Now, this I'm not going to cancel it out and say it's totally bad, because even reading the comment section of this video, I was like, yeah, it's true. It does have some positivity that it kind of like keeps you, it does help. Like, honestly, I would say never cancel shame totally out. Like the whole shame of what people will think about you. Sometimes it definitely helps tame you down on doing some certain things that are bad. I've seen societies that literally have literally no shame, and like, people do not really care, and people just mind their business. I've seen what it has actually made those people. Like, some people make some of the decisions that they make and some of the, you know, bad choices that they ended up like doing because they didn't have shame. And some of the stuff that they post, do, like some of the things that people do, I know like the lack of shame can actually get people actually doing some weird things.
A lot of African girls fear being perceived, and African culture has a lot to do with it. I feel like a lot of the home training that African girls get is centered around, if you do this, people will say this. If you do this, people are less likely to say this. If you don't do this, then people will say this. So it's a lot about how your actions will trigger or produce a response from others. And so what this causes is for a lot of African girls who are raised in this type of dynamic to be very hypersensitive about how their actions provoke a response from others or comments from others. Now, I'm not saying this is everyone. I'm not saying this is all of African cultures, and I know Africa is a continent, not a country, so there's diversity. But overall, I feel like because of the climate of African culture, which is very conservative, a lot of African girls do not step into their full potential because they are hyper-focused about making a good impression. And when you're hyper-focused about making a good impression, you reduce the chances of you being authentic and confidently stepping into yourself, because you are hyper-aware about the way others can perceive certain actions. Now, I'm not saying that we should all be mannerless and not care about what people think. What I'm saying is we should have more empowerment in terms of how we view ourselves first as the primary objective, as opposed to how well others will receive us as being the primary objective. And I think in the content creator space, and just other creative spaces particularly, we are not seeing as much African representation as we should because of this fact and because of this reality. A lot of African girls, and I'm highlighting African girls in particular because I feel like it's different, and I'm not going to get into this in this video now, but I'm focusing on African girls for a reason. Consequently, Africans do not produce risk takers. I understand that there are confident Africans. I'm not saying African girls are quiet and this, but there's a difference between making noise and making impact. And I feel like a lot of African girls, they're not risk takers. Yes, we have personality. Yes, we're vivacious. Yes, we have a lot of good things about us. And still, with all of that, we are not taking risks as much as we should and getting payoff as much as we should, because we are playing it safe. We're sticking to a certain script, and let 2025 be the year that whatever narrative you held on to as a teenager, as an adolescent growing up that was unhealthy, let it go. I'm not saying African culture is bad. I'm not saying what we are taught is fully bad, but what I'm saying is we could do better without the fear of being perceived. That's why we don't show up as we should in a lot of spaces, because we are policing ourselves by an ancient voice and it just doesn't make sense. So, which is why I think that moving out and living on your own as an African girl is so empowering, because you get to now have space to be separated from certain voices and certain viewpoints that you were used to living in daily. But now that you're out of it, you can, in a way, think clearly and address certain things you need to address within yourself. And I feel like this negative rhetoric is also shown up when you hear people talking about other people's children. So-and-so is doing this, so-and-so is like that, so-and-so is like that. And it's not always that these children are bad, it's just that they're doing something different. And so anytime there's like a child in the community or in like a familial context or just church, religious-based context who is doing something different, they're always talked about and described in a not so positive light. You hear that and you witness that, you're like, I do not want people to talk about me this way, so I will do the things that do not get people talked about, which is typically nothing, or just doing the stereotypical expectations. So that's another way that this fear of being perceived gets perpetuated.
In everything you're doing in this life, there's always a good and bad side to things. And this person actually made a very good point in their comments. He said, good and bad sides to this. Good in the sense that the pressure they give can produce desired effects, for example, excelling in school. Bad in the sense that you may develop the sick syndrome of giving too many F's about what people think about you. Once you take care of that, you're golden. Honestly, I feel like having very good balance in this is good. It kind of had a little bit of good parts for me. It helped tame me down from like doing some certain things that are bad, you know, because I was like conscious, like thinking about what people, oh my god, like if people see me doing this type of stuff, like they'll be like, ew, like that person is bad. So it kind of helped, you know, move me away from doing some certain things and making some certain decisions. But sometimes like it kind of gets really, it makes you a little bit sick to always like give a damn about what people think. And you know, it kind of puts a little bit of pressure on you on some certain things. And like for instance, with clothes you wear, like money that you don't have, all those type of things. You've made it to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching this video to the very end. I really appreciate you. Please don't forget to click the like button. It helps with the algorithm and I appreciate that so much. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here and you're watching me for the very first time, and leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.